run me through it from bottom to top, just names only.
Names?
No explanations. So
12 Rebels, 11th Moana Pasifika, 10th Force, 9 Fiji and Dura, 8 Brumbies. Welcome back to the Sports Booth YouTube channel. Today, a different video. It is just me and Hughesy discussing the Super Rugby, a bit of a Super Rugby
as
preview.
If they couldn't tell.
And if you can't tell who we're supporting for the season, yeah, you're blind. So, yes, me and Hughesy are going to be just doing a bit of a preview of the Super Rugby and share our predictions for the season, for the tournament, I guess. New Super Rugby. It's called Super Rugby Pacific this year.
Yes.
So we finally kind of get back to a bit of normality with Super Rugby after the past couple of COVID seasons, which I guess separated it to very much Trans-Tasman sides against each other. And even last year, the Trans-Tasman comp, I don't think you can say was a proper comp because of you only played the opposite team in that comp. So we end up with a Crusaders situation, which we'll touch base later. But yes, so I mean, I'm excited for the season. I know Hughesy is too.
Very excited.
Any opening words you have for the Super Rugby season? What are you most looking forward to? Just quickly.
The Waratahs not being last. Look, I tell you what, with Moana Pasifika and Fiji and Druha, as well as the rebuild 22 or reset 22 for the Waratahs, no way we come last this season. If we come last this season, I don't even know what I'll do. I don't know. It'll be the biggest failure in rugby history, but we've got hoops back. We'll get into all the details of that later, but I'm looking forward to the Waratahs not being last.
That's always something good to look forward to, not coming last. So I guess we'll start with the current situation of the Super Rugby, Pacific. We've added 2 new teams to the kind of 5 from each country, which is fantastic. I think this is the way Super Rugby direction was heading. Get rid of the South Africans, bring it like this. The 2 new teams, as Hughesy touched on, Moana Pasifika and Fiji Dura. So we are looking forward to seeing them play. And then I guess it's COVID's still COVID, so we're in the situation, especially in New Zealand. The New Zealand teams have gone into a bubble in Queenstown. So what's happened there is all the teams are living in hotels in Queenstown. They're playing games at either Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin, which is about a 3-hour bus trip away, or down at the local Queenstown ground. So there will be some interesting viewing in those first few weeks. I'm excited to see kind of those games being played out of Queenstown because it'll be interesting rugby, but no crowds, no nothing like that, purely because of the way New Zealand is with COVID at the moment. It still isn't quite running rampant. But unfortunately, we've already had some issues with COVID, which have caused the first game to be postponed, which is the Moana Pasifika and the Blues. Moana Pasifika have a couple of COVID cases in their camp, so they've pretty much had to shut down training, shut down everything, and had their games pushed back. So we won't see them at least for the first week. I don't know how long it's all going to take to get them out. I don't know what deal New Zealand Rugby and Super Rugby is going to be able to cut with New Zealand to allow those guys to get out as quickly as possible to play. Like as we saw in the NFL, they got it down to 5 days at the end after they had COVID, and they were able to test it and everything like that. I'm assuming Rugby and New Zealand Rugby will be trying to do the same or similar thing.
Yeah, especially now that people should have had their booster shots and everything like that. Once you've had that triple vax, I mean, from the NFL they made it super quick. I mean, I think they even allowed asymptomatic players to just keep playing and things like that. So yeah, the COVID protocols changed throughout the year for the NFL. I'm sure we'll see a similar adaptation from Super Rugby and other codes as well, because it's just got to be practical. At the end of the day, they've got to get the product out there. So the fact that we've already had a game postponed is a sign that the season is still going to be a trial, still going to be a work in progress, and as fans, we've just got to be patient.
Definitely, and I think it'll test some depth in the end. I think because, as you said, I think it'll be a moving kind of goalpost with how we actually deal with it. So yeah.
Just on the overall structure as well, I really agree with you with what you said about this is a good direction for Super Rugby to be going. Keeping it within sort of the Southern Hemisphere Pacific region area. Eventually I'd like to see Japan open back up into the competition as well. I think that's a really good untapped market for Super Rugby, and they had some thrilling games, the Sunwolves. So I'd eventually, once global travel is a bit more open up and COVID's sort of on its way a bit more. I'd like to see it progress there, but I'm excited for the two new teams. I'm sort of excited. I like that it's a growth year. I think the year where we lost a team in the Western Force, I think losing a team was a really bad thing. I understand where it kind of came from. I'm glad it's back into expansion, and I think that's what a lot of excitement for a lot of people, and tapping into those new markets in Fiji and the Pacific region. I think it's a really good thing for Super Rugby, and even as just a straight Australian fan, it's exciting to have those new teams in.
Definitely, and I think as you said, it can only be I think good for the sport. So that's the current station of New Zealand teams. So Moana Pasifika is based out of New Zealand, whereas Fiji and Dura are going to be based out of Australia. The only real issue Australian teams have had is the Western Force have been forced to move east, so now they're the Eastern Force, you could say, because of Perth being Perth. And
Chairman McGowan.
Yeah. So other than that, Australian teams, I think what will happen at the schedule at the moment is obviously all the New Zealand teams and any team in New Zealand is going to play each other first, then Australian teams play each other first, and then we're going to see from there. There's a lot of question marks over what travel is going to be happening. I would put out an early prediction to say that most of the games are heading to Australia. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens because it's just a lot easier to do it that way, a lot more movement over here. But your thoughts?
I like the structure of that. I do actually like sort of the conferencing system. I mean, I'm an NFL fan, so I like that conferencing style stuff. So I like all the Australian teams playing the Australian teams first. So Australia and Fiji in one conference, New Zealand and Pacifica in another conference. I really like that structure because I think it builds up excitement and hype. Coming from an esports background like I did, the esport of my choice was Smite, and what they used to do is they would have the European conference where everyone in Europe played each other, and North American conference where everyone in North America played each other. Then at the World Championships, that's where those two conferences collided, along with teams from elsewhere as well. And that was really good because you had those two different styles of play kind of develop, and I think we'll see that here. We'll see the Australian teams have their style of play, New Zealand teams have their style of play, they play off against each other, and then we'll see that clash of styles in that merging when those teams all do come together and play. And I like the new sort of fad amongst rugby codes taken first from English rugby, which is the Super Round. So we've got it in the NRL as the Magic Round. Here in Super Rugby, we've got Super Round, where all the teams play out of one city over the course of a weekend. I think that's a really cool idea, and I think if you can get to it, unfortunately I can't, I think if you can get to it, definitely get to it, because that would be just such an amazing rugby experience to be able to see all that talent on display in one location for you. That's
incredible,
unheard of, really, in rugby. So
it was very much that rugby championship when you had it all in Queensland. I think it was a carnival of rugby, as you said, a spectacle of rugby. So I think very similar we'll get from out of Melbourne. So I'm looking forward to that, watching that at least. I guess I don't mind the structure. It is, I think, and we'll touch base on this later when we preview Moana Pasifika. It's the harshest start you could probably get off to as having to play all the New Zealand teams, but it is what it is. It's a welcome to the Super Rugby kind of theatre for them. So what we're going to do now, we're going to jump in. We're going to preview the teams. I've just got all the previews up there. We're going to do it in alphabetical order. So we're just going to look at kind of players lost, key players, discuss each team, kind of see where their expectations are, and then at the end we'll both put our predictions out of kind of the table and winners. So the first team by alphabetical order are obviously the Blues, based out of Auckland, Eden Park, coached by Leon McDonald. I think this is about his third or fourth year in charge now, and new captain Dalton Papali'i. And so last year their finishing position was first in the Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, you can put an asterisk next to that, and third in Super Rugby Aotearoa. Now, you're going to hear me say the asterisks a lot because for especially the Trans-Tasman last year, all New Zealand teams plays Aussie teams, so it was 5 games. The Blues, the Highlanders and the Crusaders all finished on 23 points overall, and so the Blues and the Highlanders went to the final just purely because of point diff. So as much as you can say that they won. The Crusaders not getting a chance to actually play for a final because of point diff is bollocks. So yeah, they won all their games. Congratulations, they won the final. But I'm putting an asterisk next to that. But that was them last year. Probably the biggest signing in all of New Zealand rugby. Just about could be ever, because you don't ever get a signing quite like this. Where normally, you develop and you see someone break through somewhere in the system. We don't normally go to the Warriors to steal a player. Probably Lamape was the last one, and he wasn't as big as what Roger Tuivasa-Sheck was to the Warriors, was to Rugby League. Now, in the Blues. Apparently going to play 12, which is very interesting. I'm not against it. I think he's in the right team to be playing 12 with Rieko Ioane outside of him. But yes, it was. I was a bit shocked to see him not at least at fullback or wing. First thoughts from a league, you mean? Yeah, you thought that as well?
Yeah, I would have thought. Yeah, it's from everything I sort of expected, and from his time at the end of the Warriors, he'd been playing a bit on the wing to allow Reece Walsh to fill in at fullback because Reece Walsh was going to be the fullback. He handled that really gracefully, and this is I think Roger Tuivasa is the biggest probably like code swap signing ever. Like if you compare, like at the time, Israel Folau was like sort of the next one that jumps out.
Yeah.
And he was big. He became bigger because of how good he became at rugby. Mm-hmm. At the time, though, it was not as big of a deal, I think, as RTS is, because Roger is a former Dally M medalist, grand final winner, like top player in the competition kind of thing. Whereas Israel Folau was always sort of just like he could be the greatest ever, and it was always his potential. With Roger, we've seen what he can do. We know how skillful he is, and yeah, he'd played a lot on the wing in league, and that's generally a pretty sort of similar-ish transition. Whereas I think the 12 position is going to be a little bit more challenging for him, especially in defensive situations. But look, I think he's an ultra-talented player, and I think that New Zealand rugby is some of the most well-coached rugby in the world. So if he ever needs to be coached up or he needs the skills transition to him, he's got so many examples around him. He's got so many good coaches around him and teammates around him that, yeah, I think he'll flourish wherever. But I'm a little surprised that he's not on the wing.
Definitely, and I mean, you kind of summed it up. He's a good enough player to do whatever type thing. Like that's what we can expect from him. Yeah. But it is an interesting point, and I wonder what the outlook will be for the All Blacks. Like, is this a All Blacks coaches tapping Leon McDonald and saying play him at 12, or is this Leon McDonald going next year at 12, or is this Roger Tuivasa-Sheck? Because from school he was a fullback winger, I'm pretty sure, or maybe even an outside centre of anything. I wouldn't have said an inside centre. But again, we'll see how he goes. That's going to be the most exciting storyline for the Blues this year.
Yeah.
A couple other pickups. Luke Romano's a good lock to pick up, especially when we touch base on their losses. Former Crusader, played over 130 games, played for the All Blacks, good experience head. Ricky Riccatelli, a hooker from the Hurricanes who played very well, is back up in Blues country. You always need good stock in the front row. A name that could make a break for you. It's already a pretty hard back row to get into, but if he gets some game time, Anton Segner from Tasman, German-born flanker. A lot of reps on him coming up from Tasman, signed to the Blues. He's a big 6 foot, blonde-headed giant. So if he gets on the field, watch out for him. He'll be a star to watch. And then on the transfers, it says Bowden Barrett back from Japan, but I know he has played from some games for the Blues. I don't actually know. I'm assuming he didn't play last year for the Blues, but I can't remember now when I look back. So yeah, having Bowden back full time will help this Blues team and will help Roger in 12. So that looks like a pretty scary 10, 12, 13 if you look at that with Ioane, and then
especially since they already finished third last year. They're pretty scary with those additions.
They are. So the big loss for them is Patrick Tuipolotu. He was their former captain. He's off onto Japan for a sabbatical. So he will be back in the lock-in ranks for the All Blacks in the future, but he's just taking a sabbatical. And a couple others is just Jonathan Ruru and Otere Black, 9 and 10 from last year. When Bodie wasn't there, Teddy Blacks had all the potential and he's just stuck behind Bodie. He was at the Hurricanes. This is a great story. At the Hurricanes, when Bowden was at the Hurricanes, signs a deal to go to the Blues, and then the year after he signs that deal, Bowden Barrett signs a deal to come to the Blues. So couldn't kind of get out of Bowden Barrett's shadow, but that's nothing to be sad about because he is a fantastic player.
Casts a long shadow.
Yes, he does. Key players I've gone for. Kind of we've talked about them all. So obviously Bowden Barrett and the two centres. I think if Roger and Rico combine, that's a scary sight for any team. That's dangerous, especially with Bowden inside them. So those three big players. And then the back row is where they've got the front row. They've got the talent at the front row. They're probably a little light on locks, but the back row of Akitiani, Dalton Papali'i, and Hoskins Satutu will, I think, add to that whatever the flair and stuff. And I saw in their preseason game a 100-metre try pretty much from the Blues, and there's just athletes across in the pouring wet. Yeah. So I think again, I'll probably be taking on most of the New Zealand teams to kind of set the expectations because I know a bit more. Hughesy will probably be able to speak more, especially on the Waratahs, but the Aussie teams. But last year winners of the Trans-Tasman one, they'll look to go back to back. There's no doubt. They want to kind of put the cherry on top and say, actually, we won that properly last year.
Yeah.
Pre-season, they've looked all right. They beat the Hurricanes 2 weeks ago. They had a game of free halves against the Highlanders Chiefs. Lost both of those, but again, it's very pre-season when you're playing game of halves. It's not a serious competition, so it'll be interesting. I did just note the loss of Patrick Tuipulotu. How big is it going to be on the leadership of the team? Obviously, Bowden coming in, Luke Romano coming in, it helps, but he was always a key figure for the Blues. So I think that'll be interesting going forward, how they go, and then the storyline of the season, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck.
Yeah.
So we'll touch on predictions at the end because I've given Hughesy a little hint of my predictions in our little run sheet. But let's move on to the Brumbies, an interesting team. I'll just start base with where they finished last year. Finished in 6th in Super Rugby Trans-Tasman. Got the 1 win over my Hurricanes. It cost us. And then Super Rugby AU, they finished 2nd. Quality final against the Reds, which was one of the better games of footy I probably saw all last year. The Brumbies, how do you think they're going? Hughesy, again, you probably...
A lot of transition.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and they did very well last year to get into the finals against the Reds, and I thought they made a really good fight of it. It's literally right up until the end. For that game really hung in the balance. Just looking at some of their new signings you've noted here, Jesse Mogg, that's a name I've not heard in a little while, but definitely remember he made some notable plays when on the field. Cam Clark, he was the year below me at Knox actually, so I don't think I ever met him, or maybe I had him in cadets or something, but familiar with the name and familiar with the, I guess the word around him has always been his level of talent, especially, and he's displayed that in the Aussie Sevens. I know I've watched him a few times in that. So I think there's a lot of new potential there. And then I think that the key for this team, though, is going to run through Noah Lolosio. I think that's much the same, whatever team he's in, whenever he's playing for the Wallabies or for the Brumbies. He's got a lot of... flair and potential, can make things happen, but he could also be he's the linchpin. He can be the thing that wins you the game or the thing that loses you the game. So I think he's going to be really the key for the Brumbies this year in how they go. But yeah, it's a lot of transition for them, particularly in the backs, and how they'll integrate that in there is, I guess, how I think they'll fare.
Yeah, definitely, and it's interesting. I've got their transfers up, and they have lost a few more players than gained, if you know what I mean. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. Not a lot of change in their forward pack, except for the back row, which aren't big names. Ed Kennedy's a good pickup from Scarlets, I think. But yeah, it's the same. There's a lot of I guess, unproven names other than Jesse Mogg that they've brought in. Even Cam Clark, I wouldn't say he's proven. They've lost Mac Hansen, which is now looking like a huge loss with the footy he's playing. Terrific try he just scored yesterday for Ireland in their loss. I see Noah Lolesio and I see Nick White and I go, well, that's where this team's is gonna win games. They've got I think fantastic back rowers that'll run off them. It's how those two are going to get them around the pitch. A player I hadn't even heard about until last season when he came out of kind of nowhere for me was Len Ikatel, and I was like, man, that boy can play. When the Wallabies started winning games, I was like, okay, this guy's a serious footy player. Like you could tell, he seemed to work really well. Even like it was strange because the Reds have seemed to have that centre pairing that you feel is always going to be the centre pairing with Hunter Pasami and Jordan Pereira, but I can't see him. Pasai, sorry. And then now I can't see Len Ikatel without getting into that 13 jersey. So I think he'll be big in the long run for them. I can't imagine him not being an important player this season.
100%. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk predictions later, but yeah, I think it will be tough for them to do as well this year as they did last year.
I tend to agree as well. I'll be interested, and again, I feel like this Brumbies team is very much, and when we talk about the Highlanders, they could easily beat 2 or 3 New Zealand teams, or they could easily get beaten by all the New Zealand teams. Like I don't see them being able to beat the New Zealand teams, but I don't also go, oh, they can't beat them. Like on their day, this Brumby team is very much similar to the Reds team. I think they're the second best Australian-based team. But yeah, I looked at, again, the way Tom Banks is a good example as well, and I know I've noted them down as a key player. The way he played in Super Rugby Australia versus Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, it's just a difference. It's a level. Can those guys go up to that level? So, like you said, I think you're 100% right with Lolesio. If he can play well, if he can play up to that level, there's a chance there. If he doesn't, then you're there. Yeah. Let's move on to the Chiefs. Okay, now the Chiefs have probably had the best pre-season out of anyone other than named the New South Wales Waratahs. 2 from 2, mate. Or 3 from 3 if you count all those that triple trial. So the Chiefs last year finished Super Rugby Trans-Tasman 5th, Super Rugby Aotearoa 2nd, lost in the final to the Crusaders. Actually, I don't know, was there even a final? I'll have to check that. But yes, they finished 2nd. They are coached by Clayton McMillan, Sam Cane and Brad Weber are the captains. Not a lot of, I guess, rotation in the team. I think they've kept that core together from last year, and they were a pretty decent team, and they're one of those teams that, man, if they get hot, it's hard to stop. Biggest pickup by far, Brodie Retallick back in the squad.
Yes,
that is huge for them. Obviously, one of the best locks in the world when he's on form. I think it showed when he played for the All Blacks at the end of last year that he had been in Japan for a year, and I think this will do him fantastic for just his rugby and just his skill level. They've picked up a player named Tyrone Thompson from Wellington, a ranging hooker, built kind of like he's a Safa Amua player, but about a foot bigger, just about. He looks like he's 6'5", runs just as fast as Amua. He scored a beast of a try for Wellington, and he'll be a big player behind, I think, the incumbent hooker, Samisoni Takahio, who played for the All Blacks. And then the last one, really key signing, is Josh Ioane from the Highlanders, the first 5, played a game for the All Blacks, has always had that ability, but can he take it to that next level? I think this helps them hugely at the first 5 position, because they've always kind of questioned, is Damien McKenzie the guy for them, or do they play someone else? Now Damien McKenzie is a loss. He's gone over to Japan doing a sabbatical, but Josh Ioane in the trials has looked fantastic, looked like he's going to take this team in a direction, could be very scary. Let me just bring up. Yes, so the key players I've got for them are Brodie Retallick, yep, Sam Cane, obviously, Peter Gus Soakalu. If you haven't seen this guy play, watch him and you will be entertained. He's a number 8. Reminds me of what's his name? The big number 8 for Wallabies, Afro. Back at,
far out. It's gonna. It's V. Oh, far out.
No,
Valentini.
no, not Valentini.
Not
the previous Radicki Samo or whatever the.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Him, Peter Gus, and him are 2 and 2 the same player. These big Fijians run hard, attack well, and he'll be fun to watch. And he's been playing well in the preseason. And another one I've got to watch before I get into the really key players is Xavier Rowe. If you haven't heard this name, he's out of the half-back ranks and is incredible. He played a game for Waikato in the ITM Cup last year against Wellington when we had TJ Perenara playing for him and outplayed TJ Perenara. And it's not easy to do that. So he's a young guy. Yeah. He's going to be backing up Brad Weber, and it wouldn't surprise me if by the end of the season he's actually starting and Brad Weber's coming off the bench. So watch that. Then their core, and which will make this team very good, is their centres. They've got Alex Nankinville, who's a great backup to their 2 All Blacks, Antonio Lina-Brown and Quinn Tupaia, who will be their 2 centres and will lead this team in the back line. Their forwards will get rolling and then their backs will play off it. So I've got as my expectation they'll always be in the mix and have the potential to go all the way. Can they do it? From pre-season, they've looked very good. They look scary.
Yeah.
I said their rolling maul looked fantastic in one of the games. I think it was against the Moana Pasifika. They looked dominant. They did it again in this game of free halves. They won both halves against Highlanders and the Crusaders and the Blues. So I'm a bit nervous about the Chiefs. They're getting on too good of a run, I think, to start off. But yes,
it's very all of Super Rugby New Zealand, Super Rugby Aotearoa. Just reading through all these teams is just all scary, man. I'm not looking forward to the chance has been part of the season. I'll be honest.
It was funny because I was as I write all these names down, I'm like, he's a key player and he's a key player, and there was only one team in Australia that had the same type of feeling, and that was the Reds. The Reds, I went, he's a key player. If he gets going, the Reds could be dangerous. So when we get to the Reds, you might get arch rival, so you can't really get too much of a. Yeah. But at least for the Wallabies' sake, it is a bit more there. And then once we get to the Waratahs, I'll pretty much let you.
That's I have to say that's probably the most fortunate thing in the Wallabies versus All Blacks matchups is that you can only have 15 players on the field.
Yes. Crusaders. Play out at Orange Ferry Stadium. Scott Robinson is the coach, as everyone knows. Razor and Scott Barrett is the captain. Finishing position last year, Super Rugby Trans-Tasman. We've got 3rd with an asterisk because they probably win it if they make the final, let's be honest. Super Rugby Aotearoa, 1st. New signings, fantastic signing. This is what I love to see. When you get Pablo Matera, the former Argentine captain, is now signed, playing flank for them. Played a couple of pre-season games, so looking very good. Love that signing. Love getting some international flair. The more we can get players like that. Like I remember when James Haskell signed for the Highlanders, and this was like an England international signing for the Super Rugby. Like, wow, like stuff like this is great for the sport. Yeah. So
one of my favourite of all-time Waratahs signings was Jacques Potgieter. Got his signature after a game. Like he was so entertaining to watch. So yeah, I love that kind of stuff too.
It just makes for quality things when you get, even as much as, you get a Fijian, like, I think when the Crusaders had Nandolo for a while, and you're just like, man, even that is a bit more of a buzz, and you look back to like the Rapini Cuss and Balbals and stuff like that, and you're like, wow. So he's in. That's a big signing. They've managed to get TTT, Triple T, which is a former All Black, came down from the Chiefs, was always stuck behind Brad Weber, will now battle off with 2 other good halfbacks, in Mitch Drummond and Bryn Hall. So that'll be interesting to see who wins that halfback race because they've got 3 really good halfbacks. I put Simon Hickey as a new signing there, and the reason he's such a good signing for them is because Richie Moanga is actually out for the first 3 weeks because he had a clause in his contract to say that he didn't have to play to get a break. He got an extra 3 weeks off. So, I mean, he's taken that. They don't look as good with him not at first 5, so it'll be interesting to see how they go because they've never really had a good backup first 5. So I'm thinking Simon Hickey will be their man to start off, but will be very interesting to see how they go. And then the brother of Waisake Naholo, Kenny Naholo, is being signed on the wing for them. So, this is the issue with the Crusaders. They sign these guys and then they tear it up on the wing. You see Severus, George Bridge, especially Severus. Waisake has been around the training ground and has done pre-season with them. So he had 2 years of injury trouble over in England. So he's now back and could be dangerous if they get him going on the wing. Losses, not many to speak of, and this is the issue when you're talking about the Crusaders. I look and I go, they didn't sign many people, but they didn't lose many either. Luke Romano gone to the Blues. Fetu Douglas was pretty big for them in the flank, and they will be without Ethan Blackadder to start the season because he's out injured. So they might be a little short on flanks, but still it's the Crusaders. Brett Cameron was their fly half. Backup didn't actually play at all in Super Rugby last year, so not a big loss. Josh McKay kind of became a bit of a household name by the end of the season. On the wing, has gone to Scotland, and Michael Aliatoa has gone over to Leinster to play, so a loss of a prop. But again, I looked at what they're losing and what they're gaining. It's even. They're the same. They're the Crusaders. So key players, again, hard to not name the whole team, but Cody Taylor at the hook has been fantastic. Their locking duo of Sam Whitelock and Scott Barrett are probably the best locking duo in the comp. Pablo Matura will be interesting to see how he goes. Then Richie Moronga, once he comes back, he'll take over the comp. And then the man, the legend, World Rugby Player of the Year to be Will Jordan. He is the only fullback on the roster at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. They may play other players there, or if he can lock down the fullback spot, I will be quite excited to see that. Expectations wins, it's the fucking Crusaders is what I've written. So I think that'll be interesting to see how they go, but they're the favourites as they deserve to be. Now, we'll move on to the Fijian Duda, which newest team had their first real trial against the Rebels and actually won 28-24. They played a game of thirds, I think. We're down 24-14 in the second third and then won the final third. So, as you can say, new signings. Well, everybody, because everyone's a new signing. So, the big thing from the difference between the two teams, Moana Pasifika and Fiji Duda, they've done it very differently. Fiji Duda have brought, all their players are pretty much Fijian, just about all Fijian. They've done very much the Fijian thing, gone, we're going to build rugby in Fiji. If they're not from Fiji, we're going to try and get professional Fijian players to come back and play. Moana Pasifika's gone for a bit more. Doesn't matter if they're New Zealand players as long as they've kind of got a Pacific background. There is a couple where Fijian Duda haven't had to do it. One is Baden Kerr from Counties Manukau. He is just a white guy, so he'll stand out. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's just there for a bit more of a mentorship, putting people in the right position type thing. From what I wrote on them, again, we don't have a lot of information. What will be fascinating is their sevens guys that they've got playing. They've got about 3 or 4 coming from sevens to play. And if they play well, it could open up a new powerhouse, because I could definitely see what you see from the All Black Sevens is you go and play All Black Sevens when you're young, you have a couple of cracks, you turn into Jonah Lomu, then you come and play for the All Blacks as it does. If they get that going with the Fijian teams and you go Fijian 7 circuit and there's a successful transition to 15s, they could be scary. They could be scary. Coached by Mick Byrne, who was a New Zealand skills coach, the All Black skills coach for a while there, so definitely probably the right signing, I think, for this team. And from what I'm seeing, they're going to be physical. This is something you can imagine. I don't see many teams playing them and then wanting to back it up a week after. I think they're a team that could definitely be a surprise, because if they win a couple of games early in that Australian, World Australian Conference, if we'll call it for now, they could tick some boxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a scary first game for the Waratahs.
Yes,
set the tone for the season for the Waratahs.
It is, but I think once we touch base on the Waratahs, I think if there's an Australian team built to play against the Fijian Duda, it's probably the Waratahs. just with their pack size and stuff like that. The locks have brought in. I think yes, that it is. It's probably actually a good one. I think to get first out. I would just about say because I think they're going to be unprepared for the weight of how Super Rugby actually is. Like pre-season's a different beast to actually playing, but I think yeah, you've got them at the right time because I think after a couple of games, I think they'll realise how physical they are and teams won't want to play them. So
Yep.
it'll be scary. Yes, it is all the New Zealand teams alphabetically ordered first. So we'll go through the Highlanders. Finished in position last year, Super Rugby Trans Tasman second, Super Rugby Aotearoa fourth. They're very much like the Crusaders have done this as well, and I didn't name them because they're not that big signings, but the Crusaders and Highlanders seem to have just pushed a lot of players up from their area. So there's a lot of Canterbury-based players who have just gone into Super Rugby who haven't actually played Super Rugby before. Same with the Highlanders, that they've picked up a bunch of Otago players who've made the jump up to Super Rugby. So it will be interesting to see how those players go. Their new signings for the Highlanders, Reece Marshall, who's a hooker, who's been played for the Chiefs, was 2012 under-20s player, New Zealand player, then went over to Europe and now has been signed back up. And he's taken over from Ash Dixon, who's headed, after a long and very successful career, to Japan to make that money. So congratulations to him. Gareth Evans and Marty Banks, two kind of cult heroes, both played in the last time the Highlanders won the Super Rugby Championship, and now back there. But yeah, that's about that for their signings. Not much losses as well. They've had Ash Dixon's, they've lost Liam Squire to retirement, Josh Ioane, fly half, gone to the Chiefs. Michael Collins, a very good centre, has headed off to Wales again, and Nehe Milder-Skudder back to Hurricanes. So yeah, kind of a bit of everything, not massive losses when you look at what they had last season. Their key players, even the group, I think, made as All Blacks do big last year, will be big for them. And then Aaron Smith is probably the one that will. Aaron Smith and Mitch Hunt, if Mitch Hunt can take another step in the right direction, along with Aaron Smith moving them around the park, they're in good hands. The expectation for them, and this was the hardest team probably to predict, because they're a team that on any given day could win, and you're not going to know a lot of their players by name. They're probably only going to have a couple, two, maybe three All Blacks, but they're a team that could surprise a lot, and surprise some teams in the worst way when you think, oh, we've got the Highlanders next, need a win, good time to get the Highlanders, and then they go out and beat you. So, yes, their expectations are not high. I'm going to save the Hurricanes to last. We'll do the Hurricanes and Waratahs last. So we'll jump on to the Melbourne Rebels. Coached by Kevin Foote. It took me a while to find out who their captain was, but apparently it's Michael Wells. Never heard of him. Super Rugby finishing position last year. Super Rugby Trans Tasman, 9th. I put an asterisk there because realistically, if we're calling the Crusaders an asterisk, then these guys can get an asterisk because they also finished on 0 points, and it was just point stuff that put them above you. So, Super Rugby AU, they were a bit more competitive.
Yes. I'm glad you put the asterisks in there for me. Look, the Rebels, I think you've put it in their expectations really sums up the team as a whole, which is struggling and always have and maybe always will. I always feel like that with the Rebels, like they're good enough to like be middle of the pack, but it's sort of hard for them to push beyond that. I don't know. I don't have like just looking at them and thinking about them. They've got some really skilled players in there, and I think bringing in Matt Phillip was a good move for them. And so you've got him here in your new signings, and Kellaway on the wing. I mean, he had a great season last year for the Wallabies. Matt To'omua, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. They've got like a lot of like really solid players. Like I think Kellaway's the star, but yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how. I feel like this is even a team. Like I know Waratahs finished last year, but I feel like this team, the Rebels and the Force, could be the ones sort of battling it out for bottom place this year. I don't know. I'm not inspired when I think of the Melbourne Rebels.
100%. I'm in the same thing. I'm in a boat here, and when we get to my predictions, you're going to hear it. But I do not like what they've done from an off-season point at all. Like, I look at their transfers and I'm like, they've lost a whole bunch of props. The hookers, nothing there. They have Jordan Ulis is going to be their main hooker. Matt Phillips a good signing, but I mean, I hear in the Knox chat enough about how shit Matt Phillip is from own Wallaby supporters, let alone having to say it as a Kiwi supporter. So I'm like, it doesn't give me huge belief in him. I think Moses Sorovi, and I'm probably butchering that one, the halfback they brought from the Reds, is a good signing to be a 1-2 punch with Joe Powell. They're another team that a lot rests on Carter Gordon, their first five, young first five. And like you said, Matt Tamua, I as much as he's a quality player, he's getting older every year. He's getting older.
Exactly.
I don't know. When your star is Andrew Callaway, who last year was on a short-term deal, showed what he's got, I don't see him. Again, with the Wallabies, he's got players inside him who can put him at least into positions where he can find space. I don't see that happening here, and it's not. I think Callaway's going to have a good season again, and I don't think it's going to be. If you see Callaway's stats drop, it's not going to be based on Callaway himself. I think it's going to be everyone around him. They lose Cotabiti, who was their game breaker. I mentioned in the message there, they get Reinu from. He's from Otago, played a couple of games for the Highlanders. So anytime you probably pick up a New Zealander, it's not a bad thing. But I look at their team and I'm like, I don't see their centres being able to deliver for their outside. I don't see their outsides other than Callaway being able to finish well enough. I mean, you got Reece Hodge is their only fullback on the roster at the moment. I go, as good as he is, like, he might get them an extra point, but what's the point in losing the game 50-3? When he kicks a 50-metre penalty. So I just go, man, there's not enough in this team to give me they're going to beat teams. So yeah, I'm very much on what you've just said there. As bad as the Waratahs were, I don't think they're looking as bad as the Rebels are. Let's go Moana Pasifika, new team, struggled in their first hit out, now facing COVID problems. Bigger signings are obviously Sekope Kipu, prop Wallaby, legend of the game now. I think he cemented himself as a fully fledged legend that he took on this challenge so late in his career. Definitely didn't have to, could have stayed overseas and taken the money. So good on him. Same with Christian Lealiafano, coming back from, obviously, he played Brumbies and the Wallabies. I mentioned it. Lincoln McClutchy is going to be the first five, I think, actually to take them in the right direction, and I think Christian Lealiafano is just going to help him. They get Solomon Akata, who has had his moments. Again, I don't see him as a great rugby union player, but he's got experience, which is what they need. And then I've got, I'm going to butcher this pronounces, Ede Ananu. He was the halfback. He was in the Crusaders system last year. Him and Lincoln McClutchy were both the Hawke's Bay, fly halfback pair. I see them having a really good combination. Can their forward set a platform enough for them to score or to set up tries? Not 100% sure. But I think this is going to be an exciting team to watch. I think that's more than anything. They will be an exciting team to watch. I don't have many other names that I had ticked off. They've got plenty of, Super Rugby talent from New Zealand from last year. Aaron Major, I think, is a good signing as a coach. But I think this is going to be a building year. This is going to be first year in the comp. If we can get 1 win, 2 wins, we'll be pretty happy. But to have to play all the New Zealand teams first, I think that's going to put you a long way behind. So, that's all I see with Moana Pasifika. I really can't. I can't see nothing more than this being a successful year that they had been their first year. We'll do the Waratahs last, so let's jump onto the Reds. Last year, finished Super Rugby Trans-Tasman 7th, AU 1st. Great finals, we just said. Pretty stable squad, realistically. I jumped in... You go.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. I think, pretty much what you've written here is pretty much on it. So, the key players, Taniela Tupou, In my mind, the most talented and amazing rugby player that's walking the earth right now. Just a legend of the front row. Already established legend of the front row at his young age still. And then, yeah, you've got the centre compo of Hunter Paisami and Jordan Pataya that are just deadly and hard hitters as well. Back row's solid, especially with Harry Wilson in there. Tate McDermott should be the Wallabies halfback. I think he needs to get more chances. James O'Connor's he's had two parts to his career, well documented, and I think he's flourishing now in the second part of his career. And Dongunu and Vunivalu on the wings are just two absolute beasts. I remember watching Vunivalu in league for the Storm was just an absolute terror. So yeah, I feel like what you've written here is the best team in Australia. I think that's true, as much as it pains me to say it. And yeah, they need to step it up against the New Zealand teams. I think though they've got the coach to teach them how to do that in Brad Thorne. So
Definitely, yeah. I think they are poised to upset a couple of New Zealand teams and potentially be that team to break into that top barrier, top five, I'd say, which is what they need to. And I guess Brad Thorne did say it, coming off a tough Super Rugby Australian series, they went straight into Super Rugby Trans-Tasman a week after their celebrating their win, so it was always going to be hard. The biggest loss for them I had was Brandon. I'm going to try and say his name. Pinga Amosa, the actual Wallabies hooker, has gone over to France as well. So that's the only real loss. Everything else, they've lost someone. They've brought someone in. They lost Bryce Hegarty, but they brought in this Tom Linehan from Harlequins. So I don't see a lot of shift there. I agree with you. I think Tate McDermott's going to be a big one for them, and I think if he gets the opportunity, he can run wild. I've put an asterisk down because why I lived in Brisbane for 6 months. I was played pre-season for the GPS Rugby Club up there. Never got to play a game before COVID hit, so on and so forth. But I do follow them on social media. And Floyd Albury, we may watch his highlights and do a reaction to it because if he gets a chance, he's spectacular. He is a mixture, and the way I describe it is as Ponga and Bill, and you watch him and he's got a step like Ponga, but he runs like Bill, so much like Bill, reminds me heavily of Bill. He looks like he's not even trying to run and he's going at full pace, like it's special. So if a couple injuries, if they have a game against Moana Pasifika that doesn't mean too much, wouldn't be surprised if they try and get him into the system somehow because he could be very special. And I think him and linking up with Pataya, Sami, all that will be very dangerous. I think we may see Jordan maybe move into the fullback and do a bit of a fullback role this year. But we'll have to wait and see. But yes. Onto the Western Force. So yeah, last year they finished Super Rugby Trans-Tasman 8th, Super Rugby AU 3rd, which was a bit of a surprise, I think. No one really expected them to be as good as they were. But it's also not saying much when it's the Rebels and the Waratahs of last year you're playing against.
Yes. Yeah, look, I think with the Western Force, I think Isaac Rodder is a good addition to the team, stiffening up that forward pack. And then you've also put in here that there's a few players that have come over from like the Brumbies sort of feeding system but haven't had any games in Super Rugby. So bringing in some youth, which is always good for these teams. And look, I see them sort of similar to the Rebels in that I feel like they can be competitive, but I don't see them threatening like top spot kind of thing. I think they have got something though in the Western Force where they are such perennial underdogs. I mean, they were removed from the competition a few years ago. Like they just have got this perennial underdog mentality that makes up for their talent, I guess. Like they just play each game like, well, we're not even supposed to be here, so we'll just give it 100%, and if we win, it's amazing. If we lose, well, we're not even supposed to be here. So I see them as sort of the upset artists of Super Rugby AU, where I think they'll take a game off like the Brumbies or the Reds or something where they're not supposed to, and play a bit of a spoiler role maybe for one of those two teams.
Yeah, and I mean, like, looking at their team, Isaac Rodder's a huge pickup because I think he's actually a quality rugby player, a muppet, but a quality rugby player. In the backs, they've definitely lost a few names, and especially they lost the Argentine pair of Thomas Cabelli and Domingo Miotti, which both are playing in Argentine internationals. So they losing those two will hurt. They also lose Tavita Quadrani, and they did have Rob Kearney on their books. So there is some experience lost there. They have, like I said, taken those Brumbies player. I think a player to watch for them is Rishjan Pasiatoa. Couldn't believe that was his actual name, but yes, it is Rishjan.
Yeah.
He'll be interesting. He's apparently a really good reps on him as a first five coming out. He's only 20 years old, so that'll be interesting. And then they got Manasseh Mateali from the Crusaders, who actually did play a few games for the Crusaders and is a fantastic Fijian excitement on the wing.
Yeah.
So, again, I think they're a step above, slightly above the Rebels, where I look at their team and I go, Matt Phillip, Isaac Rodder. I'm probably going to take Isaac Rodder. I go, okay, this person. I think other than on their wings with Andrew Callaway, I don't see, I think there's the Force actually have more oomph to them. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go. I think it's going to be the same situation, and this is a lot of the issues, I guess, for the Australians team is the pressure on the first fives. They haven't got an out-and-out first five. Like, you've got James O'Connor at the Reds, who can do it and has the experience. Then you're going Carter Gordon, then you're going Lolosio, then you're going Rishjan Pasatoa, and then you're going in the Waratahs, which we'll touch base on, even bigger question marks. So there's a lot of question marks around that first five position, and that's where teams will make and break teams. If someone steps up and play some scintillating footy, we could be in for, I guess, some good games and some good teams and some actual surprises from these Australian teams. Good man to mention that they do still have on their books is Richard Kahui. So, World Cup winner, that's class to have on your books to be able to say there. It's their version of the Matt Tamura, obviously older age, but will still play fantastic footy. So that is the Rebels. On to your Waratahs. We'll go to your Waratahs. Oh, sorry, that's the Force. I get confused because they're both so shit. Let's go on to your Waratahs, and I'll let you take it. 10th in Trans-Tasman, 5th in AU, didn't win a game, and Hughesy take it away.
Yeah, so Reset 22 is the rallying cry this year, and, pre-season flawless so far. Pre-season, obviously a different beast to the real thing, but still good signs. I feel like the strength of this team is their flankers. Michael Hooper and Lockie Swinton, a pair of thick-browed, hard-hitting flankers if I've ever seen a pair of them. And I think when you mentioned their first matchup against the Fijian squad, I think these would be the two that are completely unafraid to just put their bodies on the line no matter what. If you've ever seen Lockie Swinton play, say what you will about the cleanliness of his game, but he is in no doubt that he's the toughest son of a bitch on the park whenever he walks on there. And I think that's really good for the Waratahs to have. And then have that tempered, though, with the leadership of Michael, for someone to sort of bring him back in line, and the smarts and the just game-changing ability. So you kind of got your enforcer and your playmaker on either side of the scrum there. Getting Ned Hannigan and Jed Holloway, I think, is really important for the Waratahs, building up that forward pack again. And yeah, look, I feel like that there's a lot of positives that have already come out of the Waratahs. I think the new coach, Darren Coleman, is doing a lot of good things for the Waratahs. They've got talent around the place. They've lost a couple of pieces, and I think Will Harrison is injured for the first game, so that's going to be a loss for the first match, at least, that they're going to have to look to get over. But I feel like the Waratahs have got the potential to. I don't think they'll challenge for sort of top spot in the AU competition this year, but I feel like they're only place to go is up, really. So,
over 13, you can't do any worse. I think a big plus for them is their coach having what was his name? Is it Darren Coleman?
Darren Coleman.
He led the Galantis, the Los Angeles Major League Rugby team to their title last year. I know he's done wonders. I've heard his name mentioned a few times in Sydney Rugby, just Sydney Competition Rugby. When I look at it, it's funny because you go through the transfers of all the teams and you look at the transfers and Rebels, Force, even the Brumbies, there's not a lot of like movements where you're like, oh, these are eye-catching. You look at the New South Wales and they've probably had the biggest turnover of players, just players going out, players coming in. And I kind of look at it and I go, well, can't complain with players going out when they went 0-13. Like, there's probably not someone too much there to save. Jack Maddox is obviously the big one, fullback gone. But bringing in Tavita Funa, I think from the Manly Sea Eagles, there's been massive reps on him. And from the first trial, I haven't yet to watch the highlights of last night's trial with the Reds, but apparently big reps on Tavita Funa from that first trial. A couple of really classy touches. Tepai Morea, you lost him as well back to the Storm, back to league. He can play, but again, I don't think he had played rugby in his college and younger days, but didn't really make the transition across. But yes, I think, like you said, the signings you guys have got, I think the two locks to add some much needed a bit more oomph in your type 5. Angus Bell's taking the steps all in the right directions. Then you got Hooper. Again, I know he's injured, so he is going to be out for first, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, apparently. But even just him being in and around the squad is such a lift. That will be such a lift to some of those younger guys there, especially guys like Lockie Swinton and stuff, to go get asses into gear. Jake Gordon is captaining the team from scrum half, and you've got the question, like you said, Will Harrison out injured. I think it'll be Ben Donaldson probably first 5, and it's like, doesn't give me a lick of confidence that he's going to be the guy to take you to the promised land. But again, it'll be interesting to see. I think he's got enough pieces around him with Isaiah Parise. A big one that we haven't actually mentioned is Jamie Roberts, the Welsh international, signed on for injury cover for a year. So I don't know I haven't seen him play footy in a while. I don't know what level he's at. But again, another awesome signing to get a Welsh international to play Super Rugby. I think that's very cool to see. Anything else on your Waratahs, mate, before I take over and give you the spiel about how great the Hurricanes are?
Look, their tagline has been reset 22. My tagline is nowhere to go but. So that's it. That's how I see it. So
hopefully
I feel like that they will be. Yeah, definitely. I feel like just by adding Hooper, they're already better than the Force and the Rebels.
Yes. Did we touch on the Highlanders, or did I just skip the Highlanders, mate?
Yes, we did. No, we did the Highlanders.
We did the Highlanders, excellent. I didn't mention, and I will mention now, just so I make sure, the halfback from the Highlanders, who's come back from an injury now. I've just stitched myself up because I'm going to have to try and pronounce his name. Folau Fakatava, who he's destined to take it over Aaron Smith. Was one of the highest recruited number 9s. Came down to Highlanders. I think he played one game before he did an ACL or an injury of some sort. So he's back in the mix. He's going to be huge for them, and will definitely back up Aaron Smith and come off the bench and add a power. But let's get on to my Hurricanes, all right?
Yep.
My Hurricanes. So some good signings. Not a lot of losses, but they finished last year. A tough year for the Hurricanes. They finished with Tasman 4th, which a lot of people would be all right with, but up until the second last week, looked like they could take out the comp, and then they lost to the Brumbies, so we don't talk about that. And the Super Rugby Aotearoa, they struggled, but didn't have many pieces in the puzzle there, and just lost some really tight games. Some key signings. Let's jump into the key signings. So the biggest one is TJ Perenara back. That's a huge one. We struggled at the halfback position after Jamie Booth went down with an injury. So TJ Perenara is back, and that is a great signing. We've also picked up Dominic Bird in the locking front. He's out injured at the moment, so as great as a pickup it was, doesn't really help. Same with Owen Franks, who is obviously an All Black coming back from Northampton Saints. He is injured as well. So as much as bringing in these players, it's looking like TJ Perenara is the biggest pickup. We've done similar in our flank stock. A lot of guys in the area have been pushed up into the flanking positions just to rebuild the flanks that we lost in Via Fafita and Gareth Evans. First five, another good pickup. Aidan Morgan's gone through our system. He's went schooled in out of Auckland, came down, signed with Wellington, has now played a season for the Wellington Lions, the NPC team, and is now fully up into the Super Rugby with the return of Jackson Garden-Bishop, who got injured last year. So those two will be our first fives, and hopefully from there they can take over a bit more of the team, because we lost Jackson Garden-Bishop early, struggled a little bit with the first five position. However, that was because Ruben Love got pushed into the first five position, and he is a natural fullback. I will be very interested to see what team gets named first, because our superstar, our one-man band will put the team on his shoulders and carry us to victory, Geordie Barrett, where he will be playing. Obviously, best position is fullback. Ruben Love, also a great fullback. A lot of murmurs that he's going to go to 12, and the All Blacks are looking at him playing 12. So, interesting, wait until we see that team name, but either way, that's our star man, Geordie Barrett, ideally taking the team to the promised land. Some losses just to tick over them. Ricky Riccatelli up to the Blues. Liam Mitchell, a lock, has gone to Italy. Via Fafita off to the Wasps in England. And then the biggest one, Nami Lamape. I've put fuck my life next to that because it's a terrible loss for all of New Zealand rugby, because he's tearing it up over in France. And then I put a little asterisk because I know Vince Ussel's left. He didn't play much last year or the past couple of years, but when he was on fine form, he helped us very much get to the championship and win our first title. So key players, I've got Artie Sevilla, obviously, TJ Perenara, obviously, Ruben Love, young man, very good rugby player, Geordie Barrett, and then whoever plays first five, if it's Ruben Love, Jackson Garden-Bishop, or Aidan Morgan, they will be, I guess, a very key player in this, the cog in the wheel. Expectations, I've put they're going to win because they are, because of the Hurricanes, and I support them, so they have to. And that is our preview of all the teams. Very good look at the teams. We are now going to hit you with a prediction. So I've got my table here, so I'll go first, and then I'll let you, Hughesy, react to my table and then tell me how wrong I am. If it loads, here it goes. There it goes. Okay, so I've had about 4 iterations of my table because I keep changing it because I don't really know what's going on here. So at 12, the team that sucks and will forever suck until they get bought out by the Melbourne Storm or something like that is going to be the Melbourne Rebels. I don't see them finishing any higher than 12, so they're going to come dead last, wooden spooners. In 11th, I have Moana Pasifika. I think they are going to struggle early on in the season, and that'll be too tough for them to come back. And 10, I have the Western Force. Hughesy's like, well, Waratahs not coming up yet. How's this happening? And 9, I have the Fijian Duda. I think they're going to start off strong. I think they'll win a couple of games. I see them beating, like you said, the Rebel and the Force and maybe Moana Pasifika, but I see them struggling. And 8th, and this may be a controversial one, I have the Brumbies. I have the Brumbies below the Waratahs. Wow. And 7th, I have New South Wales Waratahs. I think, from what I've seen with Darren Coleman in these preseason games, I still haven't watched the one from last night, but just what I watched in the first one and just from what I'm reading, from what I'm seeing with player movements, I like the look of the New South Wales Waratahs to finish 7th. So they don't finish above any New Zealand teams, but at least it's a lot better than last year. 6, I have the Highlanders. I
was waiting for this one, yeah.
So the Highlanders at 6. I couldn't decide. I could easily put them down a couple of spots, but they could easily go up a couple of spots. Like they're one of those teams that I'm unsure. In 5th, I have the Chiefs, and this is a team that is going to prove me wrong. If there's ever a team in this list that'll prove me wrong, it'll be the Chiefs finishing first. I think that they're most likely to move. And 4th, I have the Reds.
Yep. So
the highest Australian team. And 3rd, I have the Hurricanes. And 2nd, I have the Blues, and 1st, I have the Crusaders. Only third, only in the table. I think there's semi-finals at least. I believe there's semi-finals. Yeah. So I'll have to look into that, but because I've predicted them to.
So run me through it from bottom to top, just names only.
Names?
No explanations. So
12 Rebels, 11th Moana Pasifika, 10th Force, 9 Fijian Duda, 8 Brumbies, 7 New South Wales, 6 Highlanders, 5 Chiefs, 4 Reds, Hurricanes, 2 Blues, 1 Crusaders, and a partridge and a pear tree. Yeah.
Very the 12 rugby teams at Christmas. Yeah, very nice. Okay, wow. So I'm very flattered by your
and it's not just because of you. I just want that said. It's not because of just
yeah.
you.
Okay.
It's a belief.
Yeah. Belief. That's good. Yeah. Look, I don't disagree too much with that list, to be honest. The only one I could possibly. I'm trying to think where I might shift someone. Feel like the. I feel like the Dura could perhaps fall down a spot.
So you're moving.
I don't know. It's the big
force
the
above
big
them.
question mark.
They're by far the biggest
could see
question
it.
mark. Yeah, and that's again.
Yeah.
I just put them there because I think there's enough talent in that team, and they'll win a couple of games. I don't know how many, but I don't think between the Duda, Force, Pacifica, and Rebels, there's not a lot of games won there. I don't think yet.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm pulling my top 8 are pretty. I think that's why I've got New South Wales so high, because I think Duda, Force, Pacifica, and Rebels are gonna struggle to get many wins. I just see the Duda being a better team than those 3 below them.
Yeah, I think I have to. Yeah, I half agree with you there. Like I feel like. Yeah, I'm sort of 50-50 on between them and the Force. Like,
yep.
Either way, because it's like the Force have got the experience, and then that sort of fuck it mentality, and then the Dura have got like talent but no experience. So it's like, which way do you fall on that line there? But yeah, otherwise it's a good list. It's a good list.
It's not a bad list, yeah. And we'll put this up on our Instagram and see what people think. But that is my 12. I think it'll go pretty close to being correct enough. Again, I think it's very easy to say that Reds team don't beat any New Zealand teams and struggle big time. Like, as good as that Reds team, it's going to be, can an Australian team take kind of the bull by the horn and beat a New Zealand team, which will be very interesting to see. Anything else from you, Hughesy, on the topic of the great Super Rugby?
Glad Hoop's back. That's about it. Yeah, Hooper back in blue and RTS to the Blues. It's a blue year for Super Rugby.
If you had to think of an MVP this season, and again I'm putting you on the spot, if you're going to choose an MVP, I know it's crazy, but we may do something like this of award predictions via something like what we expect from the NFL, but an MVP.
MVP. Ooh.
I've got 2 names down on my list.
Yeah, I am going to say, I think it depends on finishes. I think depending on how the Waratahs go, I think Hooper's up there. I think he's always up there, but he could drive the Waratahs, like depending on the level of success the Waratahs have, he could drive them to that. And then, I don't know, you chuck one of the Barretts in there probably.
Which I've got a Barrett name. I've got Barrett, and then I've got Will Jordan. So I've got, those are my 2. I think and chances are it'll be Bodie or whoever takes their team to the promised land is probably going to get a nomination there. But yes, I think it'll be an interesting competition. I must say, favourite kit so far is the Blues away kit. If you haven't seen the Blues away kit, have a look at that, because that is probably the best kit I have seen in a Super Rugby team for a while. And so I think I might even have to get my hands on it because of how nice I like it, and I hate the Blues. So from me, that's about everything. I think that's a good preview of the tournament. I think we're going to see a lot of the players we named will be mentioned throughout. Me and Hughesy will probably be sharing our tips each week and doing a little bit of a tipping between each other. So watch out for that. See who's the better tipper out of me and Hughesy. If he has to pick the Waratahs each week, then he might be in a bit of trouble. But yes.
I mean, based on your last stations, you haven't done so well, I think.
Yes. I had the power for a week. Alrighty, that's all from us. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you later. Peace.
Peace.